Okay. Start sending us. We should be going live, hopefully.
How does it work exactly? Like, do the people go onto your YouTube?
Yeah, on YouTube.
Yeah, but on your name or?
Yeah, it's just JC Pretorius. It says that the live stream is working. Let me just make 100% sure. Yeah, it is.
Is it on?
Yeah, it's live. Okay, that's cool.
Awesome.
Then I can set these cameras up and you can see what you look like there. Good angle.
It's quite the setup you have here.
Yeah, it's been a lot of effort to get everything right there.
I can imagine this is at least
Yeah.
100k.
Yeah, like this alone is like 15, that camera's like 20, this camera's 25, that camera's 30. So it's crazy. But also, my other business obviously is running social medias and content creation stuff, so it pays for itself. Yeah, it says we got 6 people watching, so that's dope.
Yeah, I remember when I bought my camera, it was about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
It was costing like 10k, and it's not even a great camera.
Yeah, you see, like the moderate cameras are still super expensive.
It's a beginner's camera.
Yeah. So is that obviously for training videos and stuff?
Yeah, I've actually been contemplating on starting my own YouTube channel.
You must, definitely.
Yeah, but the thing is, again, like, what content do I put on?
Training.
Yeah,
talk about what we're about to talk about today. I think that'll be a good channel.
Yeah, definitely. But I feel like every second oak out there is putting up training footage at the moment, and you need to put something out that distinguishes you.
No, of course. Well, I mean, what other than, obviously predominantly training, yeah.
I don't know if you've seen that Tony Huge guy on YouTube. He's like a new version of Rich Piana. He also discusses gear a lot. He's quite a smart guy, I must say. Very intelligent, but I feel like he's a bit of a poser as well.
Okay.
It's like he calls himself a doctor, but he isn't really a doctor. He's a lawyer with...
Okay.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Okay. Let's just get straight into it, bro. It says we're live here. Yolandi's already says it's working. Sanzio says, yo. What camera are you rocking? Sony or Canon? It is a...
You're rocking everything.
Sony, Canon, Sony. So, bro, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it being here, man.
Of course, bro. So today... You want to introduce yourself first before we go into the topic, and because I think you'll do a better job at introducing yourself than I would, because you might touch on topics that you want to talk about more about yourself than I would.
Yeah, okay. I don't really know what to say, but basically my name is Armand Nel. I'm currently a student at Potchefstroom. I'm 3rd year. I'm studying physiology and biochemistry at the moment. I've also been dabbling in the bodybuilding and fitness industry for a while now. I basically started my bodybuilding career in 2016 with Coach Essie back in the day. And since then, I've been just improving on it since then.
Yeah. So you say you're doing biochemistry and physiology. So obviously it's the human body and it's, compounds within the body and hormones and everything. I mean, that's what we're basically going to talk about today is...
Essentially enzymes and hormones, definitely, and how the human body is integrated into a whole picture, if you know what I mean.
But unfortunately, in your degree, you're probably not going to ever touch on like steroid use. Like,
you know, it's quite an extensive module or field within like human hormones itself, but obviously not synthetic hormones that they've modified and changed.
Yeah.
So obviously your normal insulin, testosterone, growth hormone production,
Okay.
how the growth hormone is secreted, all those types of things.
The natural processes.
All the natural occurring processes, yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to post this story here just to show everyone that we are live. So what is your personal experience with, you know, steroids and gear, and what was your first introduction to it?
You know, I actually go way back. My father actually introduced me to it. I remember back in the day, me and my father were training quite hard. He was never into the competing side of things, but I remember back in the day, he met a guy at the gym and started using. And basically that's how I indirectly got introduced to it. In matric, I basically did my first cycle. Basically, you would think that, it's actually quite a bit of a dangerous gamble that you take on yourself, because you don't have that knowledge yet to really know what you're doing.
Was it because of rugby?
I wouldn't say no. I never used for rugby purposes. I actually only started using after I quit rugby.
They say you just need to move in a bit towards the mic.
Oh, okay, sorry.
They're much better. That's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, so you started in matric.
I basically started my first cycle in matric. I remember it was around June month. I did a testosterone, propionate, and windshield cycle. It was literally to cut down, because at that point in time I was already quite big for a matric. I think I was weighing like 95 kilos.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. And obviously the same height that you are now, pretty much.
Yeah, maybe a centimeter shorter,
yeah.
but that's about it.
So who was the first person that like helped you inject for the first time, or like that kind of thing? Where was it yourself, or did you watch videos?
Actually, I had a friend back in school, and it was a bit of a know-it-all. We all have that one friend who's a bit of a know-it-all. And he actually injected me at the gym for the first time. And it was quite stressful, because you don't know if this guy knows what he's doing.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it was actually at Groenkloof gym, funny enough.
Yeah. So before we actually talk about like different compounds and everything, we'll just say obviously neither of us are doctors. And I mean, I definitely have a lot to learn, because I've obviously, you know, through research and everything, you can learn a lot, but you know, you can never know a lot. I'm never going to claim to know, you know, a lot, and I don't.
Nobody knows it all.
No one knows it all, and everybody's body is different. You know, one person might do something and it works completely differently to someone else, and you know, that's also. I don't think in this conversation we are promoting it, because firstly it's illegal, and secondly it's your own personal decision, and we are here because it's going to be done regardless if we talk about it or not. So let's rather talk about it and rather educate and help.
And obviously for entertainment purposes, people love
that as well.
One thing I would like to say is actually doctors themselves, you would think they would know a lot about it, but actually they don't really study that much on it. Even as a doctor, they don't really know that much of it. So I feel like a lot of the things you need to learn is basically anecdotal.
Yeah.
Like trial and error, basically. Like a lot of these compounds, you can't even find it because it's not medically registered yet. Like equipoise, for instance, it's not a steroid that's really intended for human use at the moment.
That was for horses, hey?
Yeah, it's for like horses or something. I'm not sure. So it's not intended for human purposes.
People just tried it and it kind of worked.
And I mean, obviously, if it's not intended for human purposes, a doctor isn't gonna do research on it.
That's also the thing is there hasn't been, studies because it's illegal. So it's not like they can go and take 15 people and make them take these compounds and then, see the results because it's illegal to study it. I mean, they did tests on LSD, the drug, with people back in the 60s or something, and that was illegal, and there was a big fallout because of it. And I mean, if they had to do that now with juice as well, it would be the same bad thing.
I actually listened to another podcast the other day, and basically what they said is the problem with all these studies done with basically steroids, the problem is these studies are funded by like doping agencies and so on. So they don't really care about basically evolving. You know what I mean? They're just doing everything they can to basically stop sportsmen from taking.
Yeah, it's control. I mean, if you think about any industry, there's always like, the Coke and the sugar industry. No one saw how bad sugar was because they wanted to control the industry, and that's why now we realize like sugar is almost as hectic as cocaine. So people can see obviously sugar in moderation is fine, but cocaine in moderation isn't obviously. But like. People control industries, and people like the major banks control things, and people control things. And I mean, to have control, people enjoy control, and people like controlling particular aspects of life. And controlled sports and having people who are not taking juice and are in a controlled environment is they're trying to moderate that. And like personally, I don't think, obviously we all know that half these sportsmen are taking anyway. They just don't get caught.
Yeah, you see, even people think anabolic substances and PEDs are limited only to bodybuilding, man. It goes so much further into all these sports. Like, for instance, the other day they caught that, or they didn't really caught him, but it's fucking obvious. I mean, that Adesanya guy in the UFC, I don't know if you saw his...
Half these fighters, bro, they got amazing bodies, and there is no way with the amount of cardio and training that they do and the strict dieting that they would have, those muscle bellies that are that full and the physiques that they do.
Yeah, and the other day they also had a sort of like an advertisement of this one guy that plays NFL. He weighs 250 pounds and he's like 5% body fat. Now you want to tell me that guy's natural?
Yeah, it's like 130 kilograms. Never.
Fuck's sakes, no.
Yeah. So obviously, most of the steroids that are out there were used for different purposes. Like obviously, Clen's not really considered a steroid, but I mean that was made for like people with asthma. So obviously, there's things that still are used today, like maybe males with, a hormone, like low testosterone get, testosterone replacements from doctors and everything, and that's in a controlled environment. But, sometimes if you look at a bodybuilder, even though they're on juice, they could be healthier than someone who isn't.
Yeah, you can argue that to an extent.
Depends, obviously, like if someone is eating as clean as a bodybuilder, training, doing as much cardio and isn't on juice, fine. But I mean, if someone's super obese and like, scheduled obese, they smoke, they drink every night, there's a lot of things that obviously can make them more healthier than someone that takes steroids. But then also, steroids there's a lot of bad issues with it, and there's a lot of things that come with it. And that's also what I'd like to talk to you about is obviously the stigma behind steroids and what people think like, you take steroids once, you're going to get roid rage. Like, it's not always the case.
Not at all, man. I feel like basically steroids exaggerate your emotions to an extent. Like, I felt personally, if I'm mad on gear, I tend to get a lot madder than I would have been without it. But the same goes for all of my emotions, basically. It basically over-exaggerates all your emotions. And they say, basically, anabolics have an effect on your dopamine levels. So obviously, it is something that makes you feel good. And it is something that will alter your brain chemistry to an extent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was doing actually like, more scientific research last night, and there's studies where like the people that are most dominant and the most violent in prisons, even though their natural testosterone is higher than the natural testosterone of those who aren't. And because obviously testosterone is a dominant hormone, and it's something that creates dominance in people. I mean, if you look at, there was a study where if you look at married males, let's say a 45-year-old male who is married with kids, their natural testosterone is far lower than a single male. And it's, if you think about animals in the wild, the animal that is trying to fight, the animal that is trying to be superior, naturally your testosterone is raised.
Yes, exactly.
And that's also why people, I think, because like let's say a male with normal testosterone, they might be, hardworking. They might be trying to exceed in a certain aspect of life. But the moment they take testosterone, they're going to be working harder. They're going to be, reacting maybe just a bit heightened, as you say, in every emotion that they experience. And a naturally aggressive male might just be slightly more aggressive on juice. And also the problem is that, as we say, there hasn't been enough studies. So we don't truly know, does, taking testosterone really make a person get roid rage?
Yeah, exactly. I also feel like there's not enough studies done at the moment. I've seen a page on Instagram that basically promotes all the leading doctors in the world on certain aspects of what they specialize in their fields. Like the one guy, for instance, that I find really he's very well at educating people. I don't know if you've heard of that Poliquin guy. Yes, these guys, their knowledge is just, it's 2 levels above any doctor that you will find in South Africa. But yeah, basically what the one discussion he had the one day was on studies done with equipoise. And what they found was that equipoise actually naturally lowers your GABA levels in your brain. So once your GABA levels are lowered in your brain, that automatically means that your glutamate levels will be higher. And glutamate is a natural existing excitatory neurotransmitter. So it's basically something that wires you to an extent. So all these things can have a major role on your personality, your perception, your daily things, how you go about things. And I feel like, there hasn't been done enough studies on it.
Yeah. And there's been a lot of, people that something goes wrong, and in society and the media, the media like to, inflate bad press, because something that is a slightly bad story, the moment the media gets hold of it, they know if everyone enjoys hearing a bad story or something crazy that happened, they enjoy that. So, you hear a story about a guy that, it's the same as these coronavirus cases. If you hear a guy that, beat his wife, the first thing they'll say, and he was on steroids, and he was on this, and then it, plays to the story of roid rage. Whereas like now, people that were in a car accident and cough, some of those people, just because they coughed in their car accident, said they died of coronavirus. So there's so many things. Obviously, the media kind of portrays things in a way that they want to go because it sells, but also there are things like your heart growing. Whereas, your heart being a muscle, unfortunately, when you take steroids, it is going to grow.
Well, on the other hand, they say any sportsman that really competes at a high level, at one stage his heart is going to be enlarged. If you look at long distance runners and all these types of guys, they essentially develop basically heart hypertrophy because of all the extra load that muscle needs
just always like kind of at an elevated state.
Yeah, it's always in an elevated state, exactly.
That is, and that's kind of, there's so many positives to steroids, there's so many negatives, and in your personal experience and what you've done, like what's, obviously the positives have to outweigh the negatives to continue to do it.
Yeah, you know what, in my opinion, personally, I wouldn't advocate using steroids at all if your plan isn't to compete at a higher level in bodybuilding or whatever sport it may be. At the end of the day, it's going to be part of it. And even if it's legal or not, these guys use it. Like, for instance, like I said, these NFL guys, if you think that those guys don't use anything, basically you're flipping smoking crack, man.
Yeah.
Those guys are all juiced up and they need to recover at immense speed. So it's impossible for them not to take something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even if you look at our local rugby players, the shape that some of these guys are in, you look at them, you'll be like, how do you people really think? And also, it's difficulty because how, they don't get caught. 9 times out of 10, they don't get caught. So maybe they truly, because we know in the industry, because we train so often, we know how much muscle can be developed naturally. And at some point, you kind of hit a level, especially with the amount of cardio, that endurance sport athletes do.
Yeah, definitely. And also, when you take into account the type of training they do in comparison with us, it's not really... they have more explosive exercises and shit like that to do than like the heavy compounds that bodybuilders essentially do and isolation movements. So to get their physique at that level without gear, I don't think it's plausible.
You see, like people like Lance Armstrong, those endurance athletes. Because also, if you say to someone steroids, they immediately think, someone with a lot of muscle.
Yeah.
But there's so many steroids that, don't actually help build muscle, like Clen. Like if you take Clen, you play rugby, like if you get caught, you're still taking steroids. But, in no way is that going to really actually help you build any form of muscle.
Yeah, basically, that's just going to elevate your ability to basically... transport oxygen to your muscles. So that's basically essentially why these cyclists basically take EPOs and so on, erythropoietin. It's basically what they call blood doping in cycling. What these guys go and do is they use erythropoietin to basically enhance the body's capability of getting oxygen to muscles. So obviously those people fatigue a lot slower than a normal athlete that isn't on it.
And from your personal experience, going into a show, have you, because obviously we want to educate people on the negatives because, there's two sides to every coin, like in your own personal experience. And what negatives have you personally experienced? Ones that, when you experience, you're kind of like, this is too much? Or are there ones where you're like, ugh, this isn't really serious?
Like you just said now, it depends on the compound and the severity of the side effects. Usually, in my experience, that a compound that is usually harsh is considered a better compound than something that might be a bit more mild. Because the effects it has on the body is usually a lot sharper than something that is a bit more mild. Let's use trenbolone and primobolan as an example. You can run, let's say, 800 grams of primobolan and you wouldn't even get side effects, but because the androgenic and like the properties of the compound isn't so pronounced that it would have a major effect on your body. But when you take something like trenbolone, you're going to have side effects. You're going to have sleepless nights. You're going to have hair loss. You're going to have acne. But you just have to mitigate these side effects as best you can.
So I mean, like obviously people always talk about like trend cough. What is that?
Basically, what trend cough is, it isn't something that happens over time. It happens basically immediately. What happens is when you inject yourself with a shot of tren, you hit basically a lymph node. And when that trenbolone goes into the lymph node, it basically causes like a shortage of oxygen or a sensation in the lungs that causes you, or it irritates the lungs in short.
Okay. You yourself, you said you were introduced to it when you were 18. Like obviously you,
I was introduced to it younger. I just started when I was 18.
Yeah. So you, just as myself, we both have like a younger audience. We also have people that are in school, and we have very impressionable people. Like I'm sure you obviously get messages from people in high school, whatever, saying like, what should I take? What can I take? Like what kind of advice, should you kind of give someone that's obviously in school?
In short, usually I would tell someone that is in school, just build your natural foundation first. And if you have the desire to go do bodybuilding at a higher level, then I would recommend it, because otherwise you're wasting your time. If you think you're going to compete at a high level without taking these drugs, you're delusional. But if you have no desire to go compete whatsoever and you just want to look good for the beach on the holidays or whatever, don't take it. There's no point.
Yeah, because there's so many complications that can happen. And I mean, if you're not trying to build a career, you know, in anything that people do, there are risks. There's risks to, you know, even just working too hard and not sleeping. There's health risks in that. There's risks in just smoking. So, you know, people mustn't think that steroids, obviously they're very unhealthy, but you mustn't think that they are more unhealthy than, you know, because also if you think about steroids, some people think, you know, steroids is worse than, you know, doing other drugs. Whereas sometimes, you know, your psychological state, and I want to get your opinion on this, doesn't change as much when you're on steroids as it does like when you take, you know, obviously like a psychedelic or, you know, any other drug. Like your psychological state, it's not like you going to think immediately after injecting that you're the alpha and you're the best thing in the world. Like if you're a nice guy, you're going to remain a nice guy.
Yeah. The thing is with anabolics, the effects it has on your brain is more over a long period of time, whereas when you take a psychedelic or some other form of drug, it's going to have an immediate effect on your brain. Now, steroids will obviously, in the long term, alter your brain chemistry. This could be, in some cases, you can argue, okay, it's positive when you're on it, but they say your serotonin levels crash to shit when you take gear over the long period of time. So there are for certain negatives to taking it. Definitely.
And serotonin, it's more like your positive, happy hormone.
Yeah, it's basically, like they say, dopamine is your feeling good hormone. And serotonin is basically your state of well-being.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was listening to a podcast. If you look at a dog for more than 20 seconds, both of you naturally like release serotonin out, and like you can kind of, you bond. Also, like if you hug someone, you hug someone more than 20 seconds as well, your body, you kind of grow and your body's release that serotonin, and it's like a bonding hormone.
Yeah. What they say is when you take anabolics over a period of time, there are certain things in your brain that make it harder for you to basically produce serotonin. So it's definitely going to have an effect on your mental state over a long period of time. Just like these people that say cannabis has no effect on your brain. I don't know if you've had any friends that have smoked over a long period of time, but these people really get depressed in the long run.
I definitely think, you know, obviously weed, anything, overuse is bad. If you use anything in moderation is obviously more understandable when your body can adapt. But if you overuse anything, like I know many people, like especially through varsity, everyone experiences people that smoke a lot. And the people that smoke, you know, consecutively all the time always are less motivated. They are always, you know, like, you know, what people think, like the whole stigma behind weed. Like it's not what society has always painted the picture to be, but definitely people are less motivated. People, you know, you can get withdrawal from weed. Like if you can't go one day without it and you want it, like that's withdrawal and that's an addiction. So I was going to say something, I was going to go into another train of thought, but anyway, so there's definitely drugs that, you know, affect your brain. I think anything actually that you put into your body that's not naturally produced by, obviously testosterone, let's say, is produced by your body, but, you know, if you have an extra dose of anything in your body, like adrenaline, even like let's say you've had an accident or something, you passed out, the EMT gives you adrenaline, like that still kind of has a bad effect on you. Obviously it helps you like maybe wake up, but you know, there are effects to it. Like if you take certain things that your body can produce naturally and does, but you know, if you take too much of it and you put it into a vein or whatever, it can have bad effects. So like for you, have you ever seen like things that your body responds to differently than other people that you've heard, and like something that might just not work for you?
What do you mean in terms
So,
of
like,
side effects?
Or even like if you say, someone's like, I really love Trend makes me do this and this and this. But like for you, you're like, I get that, but not really. Like for me, I get minor benefits, but like night sweats are terrible for me, that it's not worth it, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, if I really have to go look at compounds that I feel elevate my mood, if I can lift my testosterone levels, let's say I use 500 to 700 milligrams a week of testosterone, I basically feel my best. And that's basically what I use most of the time during the year. I only blast for short periods of time, let's say 3 years out of the 3 months out of the year, and try to put on as much muscle mass as possible in that time frame. So most of the time I would only use testosterone, and I feel like at those levels I feel most optimal.
Okay.
Or it's most optimal for me.
And there's obviously I know people that sometimes taking way too much has actually less benefit than taking a moderate amount.
Yeah, because your androgen receptors can only take so much. Like, you're basically overstimulating those receptors, so it's not going to have the effect that you need on your body.
Because our body is actually amazing, and it kind of adapts to things over time.
Dude, our body is literally so amazing that if you have even a shortage in one tiny vitamin, it can have an immense effect on your whole body.
I don't know which camera that was. I think it might have been this one. I'm just going to turn it on. Oh, so the live is ended, but that's fine. We'll carry on because it's overheated, that camera, but that's fine.
Okay, so the live is
done, but we're still going to continue.